So I do tell you sometimes to kind of skim some chapters and pay attention to certain sections, but for chapter 9, I really do recommend that you read the whole chapter pretty carefully. Um, Emotions are a really important part of persuasion because they both motivate us and get us to actually do something when we're being persuaded, like as a result. It also kind of shades what facts we're inclined to believe and take as true. And so if you get people to like have an emotional investment in choosing this reality over this one, they're more likely to believe this one and then follow your logical reasoning of, if this is the case and this is what's true, then this is what we should do. So it really matters a lot. Even though it's not as objective as logic, it can matter more, and you want to know how to do it well. And as this chapter points out to us, a lot of that just has to do with telling a story and telling a story well. And that's what we're going to dwell on a whole lot during our discussion this week in class. How do you tell a story in a way that gets people emotionally invested? And we're going to be looking at different strategies related to that. But really, telling a story, making it feel real to people is what gets their emotions invested. And, you can do this through filmmaking, you can do this with just words, but the more there is there, like vividness wise, the more likely someone is to invest their emotions and then therefore to do what you're trying to get them to do. One thing I do want to point out is that this chapter talks about some things as emotions that we don't often talk about as emotions, but that are very important motivators for people. Two of them are kind of paired together. It's patriotism and emulation. So patriotism is sort of this like protect the group idea, and so they're both group driven. Emulation is just the emotional desire to belong to the group, and it's maybe more positive version of it. It's just that like sort of emotional satisfaction we get from feeling like we belong to a group. It's kind of bigger version of when someone tells a joke. We might even laugh if we don't get it because we don't want to be left out. How we're more pressured to go along with, displays of emotion at, sporting events or seeing a movie in the theater versus watching it on our own at home on a television. When we're there and we're around other people, we have this desire to go along with what everyone else is doing. So emulation is that part. And then the patriotism part comes in when people are afraid of an attack on the group or they are afraid of being marked as an outsider. And so patriotism is the emotional desire to belong and the emotional desire to protect the group against rival groups, whether that's countries or schools or regions or generations or whatever it is. It's the circle the wagons thing of, protect your group and don't get left out of it also, but also you gotta protect it against the rival groups or the different groups or people. And so these are very emotional things. We don't often talk about patriotism as being an emotion, but it is one. And then the other one that he also talks about is nostalgia. And nostalgia is just like this emotional response, usually positive, that we have to a past that we may not actually be remembering accurately. We're going to talk about this a lot in class, but you see a lot of political campaigns run on this exact thing. They sort of lie to you about what the past was like, and then they tell you, we'll bring that past back. And the emotions that we have about this past, even if it didn't really exist, that is nostalgia. And so it's like the happy, warm fuzzies we get remembering a past, even if we don't actually remember it accurately. So those are some really important emotions to keep in mind because they get used so often, especially on a grand scale when we're talking about running for political office and things along those lines. And one other thing I wanted to point out that you really want to make sure you've got a good handle on is that emotional appeal works better in groups, partly because emulation and patriotism are so important, but also because when you're one-on-one and you try to appeal to someone's emotions, it comes off way more as manipulation. But in a large group where you've got other people around you all responding with emotion, it's really hard to resist the urge to go along with that group emotion. And so that's why groups work a lot better than individual one-on-one situations. So those are some of the big things to take away from the chapter, but I do really recommend that you read it pretty carefully because it's got a lot of good information in it.